If you've ever been a child trick-or-treating and come up to a house that wasn't participating in Halloween, be them religious folk, foreigners not yet up on all the American peculiarities, or just a plain old curmudgeon, you'd repeat the festive mantra of trick-or-treat, get rejected, and probably do little about it. Most likely you'd remember the house, complain among your friends, and forget by next year. But some people take trick-or-treat for more than the hollow, almost ceremonial greeting it's become, and leave the edge on that ultimatum. The night before Halloween, though it goes by many names, is the hooligans' true holiday. A night where the oft-ignored or could be all the reason the hellions of your town need to make mischief. Mischief Night, among many other more specific names, has its origins in the Celtic Beltane and English May Day traditions, held on May 1st, halfway between the spring equinox and summer solstice, to mark the first day of summer. Both festivals look a lot like a summer version of Halloween, with spring-themed decorations of flowers, raucous celebrations, and feasting stereotypical of pagan holidays. Also, both festivals had a sort of reverence for the day before, a day of tomfoolery in April, which sounds a lot to me like April Fools, with Chaucer attesting in the Canterbury Tales story A Nun's Priest Tale, either April 1st or early in May, depending on later copy error and how you interpret when the 21st degree of Taurus is. About 200 years later, Puritan thinkers were doing their best to stamp out the last embers of Anglo-paganism and cast their eye on May Day, with Philip Stubbs, a prolific Puritan pamphleteer of Elizabethan England, decrying May Day mischiefs and celebrations in his 1583 work, The Anatomy of Abuses. As Puritanism tightened its grip on Britain, the old traditions were transformed under their pressure, the pranking aspects folding into April Fools, and the mischief-making retreating to the other side of the calendar, to what the Celts call Samhain, on November 1st, making Halloween the new Mischief Night. Further Puritan intercession saw this period become the three-day feast of All Saints' Eve on October 31st, All Saints' Day on November 1st, and All Souls on November 2nd. As time went on, however, and the strict religiosity of the Puritans waned, the old traditions re-emerged and became attached to new traditions, whether consciously or not, pieced together with what survived, with first Guy Fawkes Night on November 4th, then Halloween becoming the day chosen for the echo of the pagan tradition of Samhain to return. By the late 19th century, Mischief Night was firmly established as the day before Halloween, where all manner of potion drinking and hocus pocus now take place. To say the origins of Mischief Night as a tradition are muddy would be an understatement, as the practice existed exclusively among children for the vast majority of its existence. So for this and the next part, I'm relying heavily on the PhD thesis of Karen Allen of the University of Bristol, titled The History of Halloween and Related Festivals in Leeds and its District, which is an excellent read, a link to which will be in the description. The first attesting of Mischief Night, though some scholars believe this too good to be true, comes from a humorous epilogue at the end of a play put on by the Reading School, in which headmaster Richard Volpe encourages the students to partake in Mischief Night jokes and tricks, though later corroboration coming from one William Banks of Wakefield in his 1865 work, A List of Provincial Words in Use in Wakefield, is the first substantive reference to Mischief Night, in which Banks rejoices the passing of Mischief Night from the practices of his local hooligans. As a tradition of children, it's not hard to see how Mischief Night passed from Britain to her colonies in North America, carried in the minds and actions of the more mischievous young settlers, passed by older kids to their siblings and neighborhood friends, who in turn took those merrymaking and cathartic practices with them into the frontier and beyond. The term Mischief Night is most commonly associated with the northern Mid-Atlantic and southern New England regions, centered around New York City and Philadelphia, spilling into the nearby areas, with New Jersey being a hotbed of Mischief Night activities. Western Bergen County and Passaic County, with some spillover in New York, sometimes call Mischief Night Goosey Night, reflecting the playful and mischievous nature of the goose, likewise noticed by popular culture in recent years. In New England and areas Yankees settled, the tradition of Cabbage Night is preserved from northern Britain, with similar practices of gathering up rotted cabbages from nearby fields to hurl at houses attested in the Scottish Highlands all the way south to Yorkshire. The name, though, is all that seems to be preserved from Cabbage Night in America, not to say that somebody wouldn't throw a rotten cabbage. Among French speakers in Ontario and Quebec, Nuit de Choux is also observed, though I couldn't find any trace of the tradition from France, with Brittany the only place with an indigenous, or really any Halloween tradition, until America achieved a cultural victory and spread Halloween to France in the late 1990s. So French Canadians likely got it from contact with British and American settlers in Canada. From the upper Midwest clear across to the West Coast in the United States and Canada, Mischief Night takes on the name of Gate Night, a reference to a common prank of leaving a gate to a pasture open for someone's cows to get out. Commonly, Gate Night overlaps with Devil's Night, as far as I can tell, coming not as a name by the participants, but by neighbors, particularly the religious types, though not exclusively, who likely found themselves on the raw end of a rotten cabbage or roll of toilet paper, decrying the night as a prime example of idle hands or the devil's workshop. Though as the name Devil's Night sounds really cool, it's not unlikely that in some places the name might have stuck. In Baltimore, the traditional Mischief Night prank is to steal porch furniture, giving the night its sarcastic name of Moving Night in the city, while English speakers in Quebec have a similar idea in Mat Night, stealing doormats as their signature prank. In the southern United States, Mischief Night seems to be a practically non-existent or relatively new practice, owing likely to deeper religious roots, mostly rural populations, and general intolerance for mischief. The commercialized version of Halloween almost exclusively follows the northern traditions, much like Thanksgiving and Christmas, with Southerners having their own versions of the holidays, owing to separate cultural institutions and geographical realities. New Orleans, a city where many different cultures sort of all mush into something entirely different, leaned far heavier on the Catholic and Creole motifs for their Halloween, making it unique to the region, and do have a Mischief Night. Similarly, in the Southwest, Spanish and Mexican Day of the Dead celebrations exist side by side with commercial Halloween, taken from the North as the advent of air conditioning opened up the Sun Belt. Generally, in the United States, though state law varies, there are 5 degrees of criminal mischief, with degree determined by the value of damaged property. For example, not all windows are equal. While a small side window may be a few $100s to replace, a large decorative window is likely way more, thus the penalty would be higher for the larger broken window, with first-degree criminal mischief being a felony. That said, most Mischief Night activities are historically taken lightly by the law, with not only simple vandalism given a slap on the wrist, but in some cases even arson, just so long as the miscreant didn't seem to really mean whatever harm he caused, and was using Mischief Night as a cover story. That said, people do take advantage of Mischief Night to cause real mayhem, with people who treat every other night as Mischief Night going extra hard. The post-industrial Rust Belt of America, as economic opportunities shrank and the best and brightest of the cities left for greener pastures, Mischief Night began taking on a more violent tone, particularly in Detroit. Starting in the late 60s and escalating steadily every decade, Devil's Night in Detroit saw extreme acts of vandalism, with arson becoming the favorite activity for the idle hands of the former Motor City. The arsons began in the inner city, but as more and more people left, the firebugs spread to the suburbs, finding ample kindling in the throngs of abandoned houses. In 1984, nearly 1,000 fires were reported in the city, and, while not exceeded, didn't slow down much in the 90s, with 1994 being the last straw for the citizens and city government, resulting in Mayor Dennis Archer organizing Angel Night. Attracting over 50,000 volunteers, Angel's Night participants patrolled neighborhoods with lanterns and flashlights on Mischief Night and Halloween to deter any vandals. The Angel Night program was a success, and over the next decade the number of arsons fell to below 200, and as far as I can tell, acts of arson are down now to almost nothing. That said, most Mischief Night pranks come nowhere near Detroit levels of destruction, and it's generally accepted that young mischief makers have in the past been given more charitable interpretations of their actions should they get caught. But as time has gone on in this country, people, especially those most deserving of mischief, have gotten more hysterical and insane than ever, so make that mischief at your own risk. In the age of cheap, discreet, high-definition doorbell-mounted cameras, it may be hard for the young whippersnappers of today to imagine a world where they could commit such tomfoolery and get away with it. But not so long ago, for the price of a couple rolls of toilet paper and a dozen eggs, you and your delinquent friends could get into some mostly harmless but very fun chicanery and still be out trick-or-treating the very next night. Thank you for watching, and have a happy Halloween.